The path that we're currently walking, it's really not theoretical in any way. It's actually covenantal. So it's all about covenant. And, that's the path that we're on. There's nothing that says this is theory. And the more we dive in, the more we realize that it has nothing to do with theory. It's all about covenant. And, what Yahweh does, he doesn't just call us to be aware. He calls us to transform. So it goes beyond just him giving us knowledge, but he wants our lives to be transformed. And that's what it's all about. And we see in Matthew 22:14 and 2nd Esdras 8:3, it says two things here, or it says something that basically is a witness to this call that we're on. And that is that right from the beginning, that the Most High has always worked through a remnant, not a majority. And, that's what this week is called, we've titled it Called versus Chosen, because there is a difference. There's a difference between being called and being chosen. In week one, we talked about in week one being in this long series that we're going to do from the spring feast to the fall feast. We were talking about how that the structure is revealed on two different paths. So the structure that Yahweh is calling us to is revealed on two different paths. And there's a broad path, which it's easy, it's full of mixture, and actually leads to destruction. And then the narrow path is the one that's restricted. There's restriction on this narrow path. There's pressure and there's life. And this is not a one-time choice either. It's a walk. It's something that continues. It's something that it starts and doesn't have an end until it ends. So it's not a one-time, I entered through this gate and everything is well. That's not the way it works. And we'll see that. We also saw where Jubilees confirmed that this pattern happens throughout the generations. So the righteous, the set apart, walk uprightly, while others are corrupted on the path. And the path of corruption is the broad way, the way that many choose to follow. And our reference there was in Matthew chapter 7, verses 13 and 14. This is what we hear in Matthew 24:13. But he who shall have endured to the end shall be saved. Endurance tells us that this journey is not a one-time entry and everything is set. There's a journey that's involved. And so the key question here, if many begin, why do so few finish? If so many begin, why do so few finish?
Because they don't endure. People fall off. They don't continue in following that narrow path, so that's basically it right there.
That is it. I mean, endurance is a requirement, because that's what Matthew 24:13 is telling us. But he who shall have endured to the end shall be saved. That's a requirement. And you know what else it tells us? And I thank you for that, Yaz. It's spot on. The other thing it tells us is that it's not about enthusiasm either. I mean, enthusiasm is not something that lasts. We can be excited and enthused about something, but that doesn't cause us to endure, because it fades. And what is required is to endure. And endure tells us something that we'll talk about here, because in 2nd Esdras chapter 7 verses 6 through 9, it tells us that the path is narrow. It also tells us that the path is dangerous. It says it's like fire on one side and deep water on the other. It's dangerous. Fire burns you up. Deep water drowns you. And that's what it says this narrow path is like. It's dangerous, and it's narrow. That means we have to stay focused so that we don't fall off of that path. And that's what Yaz is just referring to, that people fall off. And many times people fall off because they did start out with some form of enthusiasm that wasn't necessarily based on truth. It was based on something emotional. And emotions, enthusiasm, etc., that does not cause us to remain on the path. So the narrow path, what scripture tells us is that many are called, few are chosen. That's what we see in Matthew 22:14. Few are chosen, but many are called. And this is not something that's random. It's a process. It's a process of being chosen. Why? This goes back to the previous scripture we read. Endurance, those who endure. It's a process. It's not random. So the calling is the invitation, but the choosing is a result after proving our worthiness, if you will, along the narrow path. Calling is the invitation. Choosing is the result after proving our worthiness along the path. Many are called, few are chosen. Now, is that harsh? He's calling many, but he's only going to choose a few. Is that something harsh that that the Most High has put out into this world?
No, I think it's a choice. I don't think it's harsh. I think, it's free will. It says many are called, but few are chosen. That part could be, kind of deep if you allow it to be deep. But I think the ones that are chosen are the ones who are choosing to obey and follow his commands. So yeah, I don't think it's harsh. It's just like we have a choice, while we're here to do, what the Most High wants us to do. So I don't consider it harsh personally.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's good. I think of, I've been, and maybe you guys have too. I've been invited I've received an invitation to events where the instructions were, this is the day of the event. This is the time of the event. And the doors will lock at a certain time. If you're not there inside the doors by that time, you don't get in. And that reminds me of what this invitation is. Many are called, few are chosen, because the instructions are not followed. And that goes back to the obedience, Yaz, that you were talking about. Not obedient, then you don't get chosen. That's pretty simple. And I agree. I know there are people who will say that, the Most High, he doesn't, that's not his behavior. That's not his character. But it is, because that's what the scripture says. And people have tried to soften it, but that's not what the scripture says. He's very, very direct in what his requirements are. Is that the calling itself is not the arrival. It's the it's really the entry into testing. You know, we can't say we've arrived because we have discovered truth. That's not it, because that's just the beginning. We will be tested. Luke 13:24 says, strive to enter through the narrow gate, because many, I say to you, shall seek to enter in and shall not be able. Interesting word here that's used. Strive. Strive says that there's agonizing, there's struggle, there's effort to enter, meaning it's not easy. And you know, the path itself begins narrow. It doesn't narrow later. It is narrow right from the beginning. And you know, when we think about that, the world would say, you know, that type of mentality is not the behavior of the Most High. It's not the behavior of Yahweh, but that is his behavior. And this is our Messiah speaking, saying the path is narrow, the gate is narrow. So yeah, this is something that we have to really latch onto and understand, that our Father, he's not messing around with those who would choose to think that he is not selective. He is selective. Then we see, you know, called is really equal to being summoned out of the world system itself. And what we see in Yasharal, which is Isaiah 55:6, seek Yahweh while he is to be found. Call on him while he is near. And just like when Yasharal, when they were leaving Egypt, leaving Mitsrayam, they were gathered, but they were not yet proven. So all of Yasharal gathered and left Egypt, but they haven't been proven yet. Basically, they were invited into a journey, but they had not been proven. And the response was certainly an emotional response. They'd been in slavery. Now they're free. So certainly an emotional response. But there was also fear. And we saw that fear when we read the accounts of their exodus. We see the fear and how they created, you know, bulls and of brass and idols, just like they experienced back in Egypt. But we also see that there was an awakening that took place. And so they all gathered, and yet they discovered that this journey would not be easy. And that parallels to today. You know, we are discovering the journey itself is not easy because there are few that are finding it.
Right, Brother Daya.
Yes, sir.
So, you know, I have a hard time with this because these Israelites, they were experiencing all of the plagues. They were seeing, you know, water turn to blood. They were seeing frogs falling out of the sky. They were experiencing all these miracles that the Most High was doing to free them, to allow Pharaoh, you know, to soften his heart, to you know, let his people go, right? And you're saying, obviously the scripture's saying, but these guys are all in the wilderness after already being freed from slavery, after all these miracles, after manna falling out of the sky, after everything happening. I don't understand how they are still in disbelief. Now, us, thousands of years later, I can see why we can be like, Okay, I'm reading out of the Bible. But these actual people, our ancestors, were receiving all these blessings, all these miracles, but still in disbelief. To me,
Mm.
that is I don't know. It's just mind blowing. I don't understand that because we don't get the same. I don't see manna falling out of the sky today. I don't see all this stuff. But
Yeah.
these people did, but yet they still worship false deities and all these things. That part is weird.
Yeah. And it does say something uh, about people, because today we have in writing the historical account of what happened to our ancestors, their disbelief, their disobedience, the result of that being, what they went through, not only in the wilderness, but also the curses placed upon future generations. We can read that. Everyone, it's available to everyone to not just read it, but to be responsible to understand it, to study it, to come in alignment with Yahweh. And most people are rejecting it. Now, so which one is weirder? Is it more weird for the people who directly experienced it to reject, or for us in the modern day to reject it based on what we've read and what we've come to understand that has historically happened? Which one's worse? That's the question we have to answer. We are today just as guilty as our ancestors. And so I thank you for pointing that out, y'all, because we can look back and we can say, man, I don't understand how they could just ignore and go back to worshiping false deities, idols, pagan gods. I don't understand how they can do that. And then we can read how they did that. We being in general, just people in general, we can read how that occurred and point to them, but not point to ourselves. Does that make sense?
Yep.
It's a hard thing for us, man, to really align with the Most High. It goes back to this narrow path, this narrow way of it. And it's not just a path; it's also a way of thinking, right? So yeah, I appreciate you pointing that out, because it's real. It's real, for sure. Yasharal, chosen equals refined by fire. It's being chosen is not easy. And in Zechariah, and I shall bring the third into fire and refine them as silver is refined, and try them as gold is tried. They shall call on my name, and I shall answer them. I shall say, this is my people, while they say, Yahweh is my Elohim. But he says a third had to be tried and refined. Well, actually, it doesn't say they had to be. It says, and I shall bring the third. So everyone is being tried and refined, but only a third make it out. Man, that's tough. That's tough. That's tough. And, heat itself, reveals impurities. We can study how, this metallurgy, how metal is refined and so forth, and it brings out impurities. The heat brings out the impurities, but only what endures remains. So all of these impurities, they come out of this metal under this high heat, but only the part that endures remains. So only the part that is essentially pure remains. Everything that's impure gets rejected. And what is Yahawah saying? What's been revealed to us is that we are being proven, we're being refined, and only those who are pure will remain. Harsh reality, but that's the word. So the difference is not about knowledge. Yah said it earlier. It's about obedience, period. It's about obedience. James 1:22 tells us something that probably most of us have heard all of our lives, and about doers versus hearers. And it says, become doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. So anyone who believes that, once we hear, everything is fine, that's not how it works. We're deceiving ourselves if we believe that. We have to become doers of the word. And at the end of the day, what happens after we've been called? The fact is that many hear the truth, but actually few submit to it. Few submit to the truth, even after they hear it. Because what modern religion has taught us is that it's easy. And it's not. So there's a pattern that's established in Torah. And this is what we just discussed, that all left Egypt, all left Mitsrayam, but few entered the promised land. Few. At the end of the day, when we think about it, we can picture this pretty clearly, that this large group, this nation of people that are coming out of Egypt. And then that's on the front end. Then on the back end, when they enter the promised land, it's only a few of them left. Man, that's refining right there.
Not one of these men of this evil generation shall see that good land of which I swore to give to your fathers. That's it.
Wow. We think about that, and I'm gonna have you read down to verse 38, I believe. But before you do that, not one of these men of this evil generation, man, that is Yahawah says these men are evil. I'm bringing them out of Egypt, but they're evil. Why did he consider them evil? Because of disobedience. All right, continue on to verse 38, I believe.
Okay. Except Caleb, son of Yephuniah, he shall see it, and to him and his children I give the land on which he walked, because he followed Yahawah completely. And this is verse 37. And Yahawah was enraged with me for your sake, saying, you don't go in there either. 38 says, Yahushua, the son of Nun, who stands before you, he shall go in there. Strengthen him, for he shall cause Yasharal to inherit.
All right.
Yasharal to inherit.
The fact is that these men, they were the only two that stood and said, we can go into this land. That's amazing, because what had happened was that these other men, they were fearful, they were afraid of the giants in the land. But Caleb, and I think the modern English word there's Joshua, but Caleb and Joshua, those are the only two that stood.
That kind of ties into the precepts, maybe with King David, you know what I mean, how he stood up when everybody else didn't want to stand up, to the Philistines. He was like, "Are you kidding me?" So yeah. it kind of took me straight to that scripture verse.
Yeah, same pattern, right?
Mm-hmm.
Same pattern. And it's amazing. We see this pattern all throughout scripture. There's only few that are willing to stand. When we look at Ezekiel, also verses 37 through 38, it simply says this: I will bring you into the bond of the covenant. So we're going to be together in covenant together. But then it goes on to say in verse 38 that he will purge the rebels. It reads like this: and I shall make you pass under the rod, and shall bring you into the bond of the covenant. We'll be in covenant together. Then he goes on to say, and purge the rebels from among you. Who are the rebels? Verse 38 goes on to say, those who transgress against Yahweh, meaning the disobedient. Anyone who's disobedient and not in alignment, he calls them rebels. He wasn't playing. And the rest of verse 38 says that they'll be purged from the land where they sojourn. They'll be purged. But then it goes on to say, from the land where they sojourn, I bring them out. So the land where they sojourn, that's Egypt. So he brought them out of Egypt. But they shall not come into the land of Yasharal. Why? Because of disobedience. They transgress against Yahweh. And you shall know that I am Yahweh. I find that interesting for a couple of reasons, but I think of it this way: you can believe whatever you want to about Yahweh, but one thing is for certain, that we all will come to know without a doubt, when it's time to enter in to the promised land, and that promised land being our ancestors into the promised land then, and the promised land that is to come in the future, the New Jerusalem. Well, that's where we're all headed, to the New Jerusalem. But there will only be a remnant that actually get to enter in. And the remnant are those who are obedient. It's the same pattern. It's the same pattern. And this wilderness journey that Yasharal was on after leaving Egypt, and that purging and that refining, that's the same journey that we're entering in now. We're being refined. There will be those who are purged because of disobedience. The wilderness itself, it's not optional. Everyone has to go through the wilderness. It's a requirement. It's where separation actually occurs. That's where he's separating. He's doing the separating. That's where it occurs. As we continue walking the narrow path together, remember what we've seen. Many are called, but not all endure. Yasharal was brought out of Mitsrayam through deliverance, but the wilderness revealed who would remain faithful. And that same pattern still stands today. Because salvation is not just a moment. It's a journey of proving, refining, and endurance. In part 2, we go deeper into the wilderness pattern. Why pressure exposes the heart. Why many fall away after the calling. And how the remnant is actually formed. The journey is not over. The testing begins now. Click part 2 and continue walking the path.